You have to shoot more than one bad guy today,
I think there was,
definitely one.
I think just one. There was what was it exactly?
Well, I don't know. I think there was a truck of some kind involved, like a tow truck or something. He's dragging a cable and smashed into the police car. And I think they probably felt that him trying to ram into a police car was something that they weren't going to tolerate. So they shot him. I would have too.
Jason Scott called me right a couple minutes ago. He just got back being out there all day long.
Oh, at the scene. Yeah, I suppose I got to do a investigation. There really isn't any need to charge the guy with a crime, though. He's dead.
Yeah.
We got to have the evidence. Oh, you don't. I guess in case somebody wants to claim the police were not acting appropriately, you want to have the facts. But
Yeah. I don't know why you jacked the tow truck in the first place.
my guess is they're addicted to something, and their brain doesn't work the same as it used to, and they're figured they could get some money for it. That's just a wild guess.
Long time no see. How are you?
Hello, Mickey, yourself.
I'm well, thanks.
Good.
Wolf, we have four.
No, no, not yet. They'll be in here pretty soon, I bet. Is there something that needs to be voted on today? Something urgent? Is there something urgent that has to be voted on? What are we gonna do? Discussion, huh? What? Oh, that's fine. It's a form of communication I prefer over text messages because I'm old. Young people like text messages.
Yes.
Hi, Walter. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Okay, I'm just testing my microphone. Thank you. It's Jonathan.
Oh, sounds good to me.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Sorry for the hassle.
Yeah. That's ultimately what it's hoping for. Yeah, I was probably just gonna share this.
You know. Everything's good. How are you?
Doing all right. How about you?
You? Awful nice to come inside.
Nice to do what?
Awful nice to have to come inside.
Oh, because it's hot outside.
It was good out there. So. Yeah.
Got a toothbrush.
My glasses.
Yeah,
Can't see. They're super, there's little, lightweight.
I wasn't alarmed. I just was.
Somebody always thinks it's a cigar or something.
Cigar.
Yeah, carry those around.
Smoke a stogie during the meeting.
Yeah, all right.
The way they used to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Smoke filled rooms.
Yep. Oh, cool.
I'm early.
How are you?
You're doing fine.
Out cleaning the pool and
Hmm.
filling the hot tub.
Sounds like a good idea. Getting ready, huh?
You betcha.
Gonna be warm.
What mess are you making over there at the fire department?
Yeah, I know, I'm a troublemaker. I'm surprised you guys let me attend this meeting.
We all agreed it'd be a pretty boring place. That's my theory anyway.
I pretty well predicted this, reaction the hospital's having to what the fire district told them.
But I didn't, can you share?
Yeah, in the communication, I saw it and I said, well, here's how the hospital's gonna interpret this, is that we're gonna give them a deadline. And we're just gonna stop doing transfers from their facility to other facilities. Oh, no, that's not what we said. I go, oh, pretty close. I mean, that's what they're gonna see, and that is exactly, they came to the meeting and they're not happy.
So you're not gonna do the transfer?
I don't
right?
know.
I mean, what's the rationale?
Well, what I think one of the main changes is apparently there was a strong belief for a lot of years that because we had ambulance service area two and the hospital sits inside that area, that was our responsibility.
Mm.
And the state of Oregon saying, no, it's not your responsibility. It's totally up to the
Yours is
hospital to
just
figure out
get
how to.
From the emergency to the.
Yeah, that, when we
hospital.
get that agreement with the county to cover that area, it's the 911 stuff.
Yeah,
And the hospital has to figure out how to get people from their facility to somewhere else. Well, that's, fine to say to the hospital, this is your responsibility, but I pretty well predicted they're gonna say, well, how are we supposed to do that?
it's a good, fair question, right?
Right.
What's everybody else doing? I mean, this isn't just a Dalles issue, right?
Well, it is right now. Lots of agencies do transport, like Hermiston takes people lots of places and Baker.
Mhm.
So I don't know exactly how they handle it, what their policies are. I mean, Hood River still does interfacility transfers, but after a certain time at night, unless it's meets a certain criteria, they won't do it.
Hmm.
And the hospital stance is if a doctor says it needs to be done, you guys get up here and get it done. Questions asked, and the fire district's kind of saying, well, here's how that's gonna go. You call up and ask us to do something, we're just gonna say, no, we're not gonna argue with you.
Hmm.
But to me, the party that you can't ignore in all of this is the patient.
Yeah, there's that. one, right? Yeah,
Or
particularly if it's important that they get to Good Sam or something,
it's all
right?
about the fight between two agencies. And
Right?
what's best for the patient is
Yeah.
like, we can't be bothered with.
Right?
Way up here.
Well, and you get compensated. Oh, right. you get compensated.
I don't think it's a money issue.
Oh,
To me personally, there is a safety component. And I probably did more transfers from here to Portland than any person on the planet at this time. And they send us in the middle of the night a lot, and it's dangerous because we're sleepy.
oh, sure, right, because you worked 8 hours
We
or
work
10
24
hours
hours
or
a
more
shift.
on your
So at 2
other.
o'clock in the morning, I've been at work for a long time.
Sure.
Sometimes I can do it and sometimes I'm exhausted. So,
Yeah.
but that's, normally it's.
See,
it's
Tim?
about and making money doing stuff that's not.
Charge accordingly, right?
We're losing paramedics faster than we can. Certain point, have like 2 paramedics in town, if you really want to send one to Portland.
Anybody online? Oh, okay. Thank you. What was that? It's okay. I'm,
But he did, and he,
I know nothing.
apparently there was something on KODL that.
Oh, yeah.
I know nothing. It's okay, Tim. You can listen to the radio program. You're allowed.
I've got two sentences. I know nothing and request denied. Got those both down really well.
You're old enough to remember Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, yeah. Daniel. Sergeant Schultz. Not worthy. I'm not worthy. Hours traffic. In the Dalles, can you imagine?
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency Board meeting for June 18th, 2024 to order. Paula, will you please call the roll?
Stacy Coburn,
Here.
Dan Stett,
Here.
Todd Hagy,
Here.
Kristen Littlevick. Here. Steve McLaughlin.
Here.
Richardson is absent, Marcus Swift is absent, and Ben Ring.
And the chair, Darcy Long, is here,
And you too.
just for the record. If you'll all stand, if you're able, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
I'll move approval of the agenda as presented.
I'll go ahead and second. McLaughlin seconds.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have approval of the minutes from May 21st. Were there any changes or additions to the minutes? If not, I will take a motion to approve the minutes.
I wasn't here. Oh, somebody on.
Person on,
Yes, so Kristen Littlevick online made the motion and
I'll second.
I wasn't sure. Did you second it?
I just said I wasn't here.
Oh, you weren't here. Okay.
So,
All right. So it's been moved and seconded. So just for anyone who doesn't know, if you weren't here and you didn't have a chance to review, you can abstain, which is what I believe you're saying. And
yeah, that works.
okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? An abstention?
Yeah, I'll abstain.
So now we have public comment. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any urban renewal subject. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Yes.
I'm not sure if this is
Oh.
the right time. I would like to speak about First Street.
You can.
Am I allowed? Can you hear me? Where is he?
So go ahead for the record. Go ahead and
There's Rick Wolf. I'm from the Dalles, Oregon. And am I allowed to ask everybody a question?
you can ask questions. If we know the answer, we might defer to staff. Depends on what your question is.
Thank you. Would like to ask everyone that I haven't talked to about this in regards to the
Did
Oh, he did. Rick Wolf, the Dalles.
of the Dalles.
okay. Thank you, Paul. There's a couple lots downtown that are sunken. Would anybody here know why those are sunken? The ones that I haven't talked to about as to why.
Talking about First Street or Fourth Street?
First.
First Street, there's a A sunken level,
Yeah, I think I know why they are.
these.
So most of the town had a lot of fill, dirt deposited. So a lot of the buildings that what you call is the first floor, once upon a time was the second floor. And that area never got to fill dirt. So that's kind of the original elevation of some of the town.
Anyone else? Well, I'm here to tell you. I'm just ecstatic. I believe that I found the ship's portal. Some of you may have seen the arches next door to the Baldwin. Those were tunnel accesses underneath a boardwalk. They didn't have concrete in 1921. And so they used wood, which was plentiful. We had lumber yards. The wooden boardwalk was removed and basalt rock was placed in front of the, I call it the Chinatown building, and also in front of the blue building. And there's a white building there also. That's a cinder block construction. There's been retaining walls put up incorrectly. But what this is access to the Globe Hotel, I believe it was called. I'm not sure. And then you could walk out, in my mind, you could walk through the hotel and approach the dock. And on the left would be the paddle boats. The basalt rock, lock rock is what I call it, is underneath the road and the train. The train rock that you see is basalt ballast rock. And you can take a pile of that rock, 12-inch and minus or whichever, consistent sizes, and lay it on the pavement or mud and step on it. It will perk water immediately. The drain systems were not available back then, and those blacktop parking lots are cisterns. We have a 14-inch record, I think, for rain, and maybe a 2-foot, 2.5-foot snowpack. These people that came over to build this shipyard were not amateurs. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were smarter than the water. The road is great, and I have a minute and 25 seconds left. Is that something? I'm getting good. The mayor would be proud. There's so much down there. I am just ecstatic. And I held my camera in hand like this. I don't think there's a law against that yet. Maybe. The road is so smooth, my camera didn't move. And I made it short enough to where I could email it. I don't believe that the expense that's been laid out to us 16 years ago from the California engineering company is correct. The price is just way too much. The drawing that I seen, I don't know where the pipeline is going to need to go, or if we need it with the upgrades that may have been done since it was bid for this street. There are retaining walls that do not need to be replaced. The sidewalk needs to be lifted to do an honest bid. And it could be lifted. Some of it's 4-inch and some of it's 6-inch. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. In the back.
Yeah. David.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about the Jansen Beach carousel project.
Just for the record, can you state
I'm
both of your
sorry.
names? And
David Benko, David Benko.
Sten.
So thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about the Jansen Beach Carousel project. Last September, I went to the 50th annual National Carousel Convention, which was rather interesting, is what I'll say. What it actually gave me was a great appreciation of carousels, which I don't know that I really had that. And probably the best two things that happened was meeting a woman named Barbara Foss Charles, who has actually started the convention 50 years ago and actually started the magazine, the Carousel magazine. And Jerry Reinhardt, who's 96 years old and has been doing this his entire career. So he actually had me come to his place for a couple hours and then ended up making me stay for 3 days. So I learned a lot from both of those two people. And so we are very interested in the Tony site as a potential for the carousel. And so speaking about that, do you want to talk a little bit? Okay.
So last week we had our board voted to hire Kevin Grant from C2K. He is a architectural firm in Portland, Oregon. And so he's going to get started on the design and engineering phase for us for the pavilion. These are some examples from other pavilions. And so our intention is to do something in keeping with what would look well suited in the Dalles, but it will be a beautiful building. We're hoping it will be 2-story at least. And what we came here to express was our interest in the Tony's property as a potential site for several reasons. One, it would be a huge economic benefit to the city of the Dalles because it would be visible from the freeway, and 9 million cars pass by that annually. Not only would it be an economic benefit, but it would also be a benefit educationally to our students to have another facility downtown and that they could come to and have STEM classes and other coursework, not just during the restoration, but following the restoration. So I think that our main point today was to bring up that we have an interest in that site. We know that we don't know what the plans are, that other people have had opportunity to also express their interest. We did submit online sort of a short summary of our vision for that site with the QR that was available. So just thank you for giving us the chance to hopefully come back soon and show you designs.
One last thing I will say about that site versus the parking lot next to the museum is that it is 20 foot deeper and 20 foot wider. So the carousel would actually be a very tight fit in that space. And we are hoping to have a first and second floor. So the second floor would actually be some potential community space. So.
Great, thank you.
You said that you had a board that voted and decided to select somebody to start drawing up stuff. So you're members of a board. I guess I'm not familiar with the board.
Oh, so our museum is a for-profit. And so our board, which is Chris Sukin, Travis Brown, Connie Tomasian, David, and myself, and Gary Rains, we voted. We went through a pretty extensive look at architects. We also had an advisory board that included a number of people from downtown, Jim and Lynn Wilcox and Mayor Rich Mays.
That's the Dalles Museum Board. What do you call it?
Yeah, it's our National Neon Sign Museum. It's our board of directors for the museum. So we have since we got the carousel, started to look for an architect. And so we had went originally by interviewing some of the Restore Oregon suggestions for people that they had interviewed and who had done some different renderings for them. We've also interviewed a company out of Medford, and then we went into a second wave of different design firms more locally in Portland, and we unanimously agreed on Kevin Grant with C2K. He's very affordable. I wouldn't go as far to say he's donating his time, but his prices are very modest for his abilities. So we're excited about what he's going to do, and he's very excited about the project.
Great.
He will himself be working on this project.
These photos are different carousels around the country or?
These are, yeah. And we really like the open glass, so you really can, especially if it's visible.
The one on the bottom? The one down on the bottom, it's a dark blue sky.
But I do like.
Mhm.
You get more usable space out of a square one. And if we want to do something that's also geared towards the community, it would probably make more sense to have it be something that's square versus round, because you'll get more square footage to have community events or classroom space.
All right, well, we look forward to getting more information when we.
And just for the record, it's Travis Nelson from Brown, not Travis Brown.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay. So now we're going to move on to our discussion items. We have quite a healthy discussion going on tonight. So I'll turn that over to you, Dan Spots.
Thank you, Chair Long, and yes, we do. Dan Spots, Economic Development Officer for the city. First item up is going to be the fiscal analysis. Of course, we've been talking about this for several meetings now, and this is the latest iteration of this as we've continued to refine our numbers. And so I wanted to provide some updates on that, some fairly significant ones. Start off with a little bit from the first page of the staff report. March 21st, 2023, the agency staff described an upcoming review leading to an update of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Plan. That update will be another item in our meeting tonight. Right now, talking fiscal. The next, going down a little bit, the next milestone was a review of the agency's fiscal performance since the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal District was established in 1990. This included two board presentations by consultant Nick Popanuk of Tiberius Solutions, occurring on February 20th and May 21st, 2024. Those presentations are, as summarized, are a projection of recent assessed valuation increase, and this is in your packet, a forecast of tax increment financing, TIF forecast and graphic presentation, maximum indebtedness capacity, and cumulative impact on taxing districts. We've gone over these slides a couple of times now, but they are included in the packet for reference. One of the key findings was that the agency will have collected sufficient TIF revenues by 2026 to fully retire the agency's debt. This has been a fairly recent discovery, as it were, about 4 or 5 months ago now. Until now, we've always been talking about TIF being collected through 2029. The fact that we would have sufficient TIF by 2026 to retire the debt was new information, I think, for all of us. While the agency may continue to collect TIF beyond that point, state law precludes the agency from expending any such additional TIF collection unless authorized by City Council or the impacted taxing districts. You can collect it, you can't spend it unless you expand the maximum indebtedness. City Council may authorize a limited amount of additional expenditure. I have in the staff report currently estimated at 5.2 million. We've been tracking that one. It is actually 6.1 million. And the Tiberius Solutions report that's attached goes into that in some detail. The board may authorize expenditure beyond that amount with concurrence of the taxing districts. Either of those would constitute a substantial amendment to the plan, requiring an extensive approvals process. We don't want to go into any more of that tonight, but there is quite a process involved. The remaining debt may be paid off earlier than 2029, thus terminating the district. Early debt retirement would result in interest savings. Staff are researching terms of the 2009 bond to determine whether an early retirement penalty would be incurred. As detailed in the May 2024 board packet and also described in the plan revision staff report, that's later on the meeting tonight, the agency's remaining MI balance as of June 30th, 2023, last summer, that's last summer now, was 5.7 million. This total did not reflect approximately $300,000 in anticipated earnings. So that's primarily a loan coming down on the Commodore Hotel. nor agency expenditures and commitments in the current fiscal year. So starting July 1st, this past summer. The beginning balance was 6.1 million as of July 1st, 2023. TIF revenue, program income, interest earnings brought that to 8.1 million. Now we start to talk about the expenditures coming off of that total since last summer, since July 1st. Staff have provided a breakdown of actual available funds below, which account for all expenditures and agency commitments as of the date of the staff report. Expenditures, 1,254,493. That's a number of different things. It's investment in the Gitchell building, it's the Tony's site cleanup, archaeology associated with site cleanup, insurance costs, administrative costs, First Street design. It's kind of a catch-all of different things that go into that. Beyond that, we've broken out some specific expenditures and commitments. Now, these are commitments. I should correct myself there. Commitments made going forward, not necessarily expenditures. So incentive program, Basalt Commons SDCs, that's a commitment. We haven't yet expended that. Same thing with the development funding agreement for Basalt Commons. East 3rd Street parking lot redevelopment, we are doing that. First Street parking lot repaving, we're tussling over that one, trying to figure out how we go about that one. Consulting work, some of this has been committed, others going forward. So combined expenditures and commitments since June 30th of 2023, 3.8 million. That total does not take into account the current estimated cost of First Street reconstruction, and that'll be another topic tonight, nor $3.8 million set aside for First Street reconstruction in Fund 18. Fund 18, that 3.8 million is separate from maximum indebtedness. Those are two different tracks. We've confirmed that with our CFO. As discussed in subsequent staff reports included in the June 18th board packet, staff is exploring multiple design alternatives for the First Street project, including city contribution and scope reductions. In addition, the total does not account for debt service related to a 2009 full faith and credit obligation issued by the city of the Dalles, which paid for city and primarily urban renewal projects. The agency is obligated to repay the city for urban renewal projects funded through that 2009 issuance. That was a $13 million issuance. About $2 million went to a local improvement district over on First Street and Bargeway outside of the urban renewal district. About $8 million was dedicated to urban renewal projects, with $2.4 million for refinancing an earlier urban renewal bond. A lot of history here. The remaining debt obligation as of 2024 is $4.3 million. That's presently budgeted at approximately $800,000 per year, ending in 2029. But the schedule can be accelerated to conclude in 2026. Should that occur, we would also need to expand the debt payments because we still need to cover that same amount in a shorter period of time. Debt service, admin costs, relative contributions to First Street reconstruction, the incentive program, and TIF collections are major factors influencing the agency's remaining fiscal capacity. Based upon the estimates described above, staff calculate remaining MI capacity as a narrow range between $1.9 million and $2.2 million annually, not including ongoing administrative costs, as influenced by how each of those factors influences all the others. And we're going to go through a spreadsheet here, plug in some numbers, because you change one number and it changes everything else on the spreadsheet, basically. Ultimately, the agency needs to address these questions. Should we maintain the present debt service schedule concluding in 2029? With no TIF collection beyond 2026, that's going to incur rising ongoing admin and debt service with no fiscal return. Should we accelerate debt service to 2026, after which time TIF revenues may no longer be expended? Again, you can collect them, you don't have the authority to expend them. The district would terminate in 2026, which would result in interest and administrative savings. That is the recommendation of our fiscal consultant and our CFO. Save the interest, close it down earlier. How much of the remaining capacity should we invest in First Street reconstruction? And again, that will be a follow-up item tonight. Should we seek City Council authorization to collect and expend TIF revenues until 2029, resulting in additional revenue, but also continuing admin and debt service costs? I want to go into a little bit of distinction, and we cover this in more detail in the Urban Renewal Plan report later on. What is MI? Maximum indebtedness is not debt necessarily in the sense that we think of as like taking out a car loan. It's the cumulative authorization to expend over the 30-year history of the agency. So part of it may be debt, but part of it may be TIF collection, maybe other sources. Any expenditure going against TIF, many expenditures going against MI, will effectively cap the amount of MI that you can spend. It gets complicated. There's a good definition that's in the plan report that I simply quoted from our fiscal consultant. But I wanted to get that across, that there's formal debt and there's contract debt. And so what we're talking about here is contract debt, the total authorization for MI over the 30-year history. And that's $29 million, most of which has been expended. There are 2 written reports included in the fiscal analysis, Johnson Economics and Tiberius Solutions. So with that, I can take questions.
Questions?
Not asking for a decision or direction beyond that. It's an update. Wanted to tell you where we stand right now. I think one point to clarify, I mentioned 1.2, 2.2 million. Sounds kind of bleak. This is not necessarily a trade-off between projects. As we go into the First Street discussion, we're looking at scope alternatives. We're developing a list. We have a list of priority urban incentive program projects. Looking ahead, it should be possible to balance some of these. We can't do everything, obviously, but the hope and the goal is still to be able to tackle First Street and some of the incentive programs as we look forward to this. So I go through the spreadsheet here and show some numbers.
I looked at several of the drawings and stuff that had to do with First Street. And when I was listening to you, I thought I heard you say First Street Bridge. Is that just my hearing, not hearing you
I'm
right?
sorry, Walt, a little bit louder, sir.
I thought I heard you say the term First Street Bridge. Am I
First
just
Street Bridge?
Yeah, so
Oh.
that's what I thought. What bridge are we?
No, we've got enough
Okay,
associated with First
okay.
Street right now without doing a bridge.
I was like, where's this gonna go? So,
I might have said that, but
oh, that's all right.
thank you.
All right. And Kristen and anybody else that's online, I can't see you currently. So if you need to just speak up so that I'll know, like if you're raising your hand or something, I won't see you. Okay. Looks like there's no questions at this time.
All right.
Okay.
Shall we go through this?
Yeah, so we just wanted to provide and basically the numbers, how we've been looking at these numbers. Pretty comprehensive spreadsheet we've been working on. Better turn my screen on. Oh, there it is. So as Dan was mentioning, this is the spreadsheet that we've started with. This has a breakdown of our basically beginning balance, TIF revenue. Of course, beginning balance will be populated as the years go on. This has given us an idea of how to, really break down the available funds that the agency has. So after looking at,
Where is this located in our packet?
it's not, this is more of a,
It's a working
It-
document.
yeah, it's very much a working spreadsheet.
And rather than include one in the packet, because that would, I think, suggest, okay, those are solid. This is very much a living.
Fluid.
tool.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so after running resources, looking at the tax increment, the breakdown there, look at total URA resources from there. You add in program income. We've talked about program income a couple times. Our consultant talked about this as well. This is the money that's coming in. These are in loan repayment interest payments for the top line is for the Commodore project, the Commodore building, which is owed $282,000 by the end of 2027. The The Tony's grant here is a grant that we received, a very small grant, but a $60,000 grant to go towards the Tony's demolition project. 25,000 will be money that is coming in for the sale of the recreation building. But as you can see, there's not a lot of program income coming in. Question?
At this point in time, I know there's been some discussions about that loan repayment.
Mhm.
At this point in time, the expectation is that will be paid in full and,
Correct.
okay, that's
Yep.
all. Okay.
Yep.
And how does that, so that's going to impact cash flow if we're talking about potentially ending in 2026, and then you have a huge lump sum coming in after that.
Yeah, it would come in. It seems like it's in the wrong year here. I think it should be coming in actually 2026. It's due in 2026. But yes, that would be, if it would impact cash flow. This is all something that still very fluid. So if the idea is to, pay our debt off in 2026, that would be something that we have to consider as well. Then looking down at expenditures, these are the debt payments that we're talking about, about $800,000 every single year. This is until 2029. In the event that we were to close out in 2026, which is D, we would basically need to move each of those over into this area about. Administrative cost or administration. The reason we just threw in this 100,000 here. This is ultimately the cost. I mean, this year, administrative costs for our team was $150,000. So, in the event that we were to scale back and anticipate obviously fewer projects with a more finite amount of money, we estimate we could probably, these are just throwing numbers out there though, but $100,000 to basically administer the Urban Renewal Agency. So these figures on the side, these are the expenses that Dan just went through. These will not be paid out in this fiscal year. As you can imagine, this fiscal year ends in 2 weeks, but these are commitments that were made. So they're being put into this bracket over here. But the number we're looking at, the couple numbers we're looking at, there's the surplus that we look at. There's also maximum indebtedness. So here, what can be confusing is it looks to be more money is available, but there is actually, we need to factor in those loan payments. So we get to the bottom here, and this Dan mentioned, it's a 1.9 to about 2.2. The 2.2 that he'd mentioned, that is if you go back up and you remove all these admin costs. If you remove those, the number here in the bottom corner is about 2.2. So this is the reason we bring this up. Lots of numbers here, but the reason we bring it up is this is how we have been kind of planning around how best to pay for the First Street project, as well as allow for incentive program projects going forward. So this is a number that this is just an exercise that we've been, you punch in a number here, you'll have your impact. You can punch in how much maybe that we spend on this next year. We budget this next year for incentive program projects and the following years going forward. So it's really been for us, it's been a number crunching planning exercise, if we will, but we wanted to share this with you because these are the numbers. These are the fresh numbers. We didn't want to we put the number range in there because there is some fluidity to this spreadsheet. And I think there's any questions on this, I'd be more than happy to answer them, but I just wanted to have this available for us, and because we have a lot to discuss this evening. And as we jump into the First Street project, as you'll see, the First Street project, we have $3.8 million that is not showing up on here. And, it's a part of Fund 18. So it's in part of this separate fund. So when we are thinking about First Street, whatever the cost is, the cost breakdown of Third Street, you can always just subtract 3.8 from that. So when we are planning for this, it helps us get a visual of how to allocate the funds.
Any questions about this? Okay. You're good.
Okay. That would be completion of my staff report at this point. Move along to First Street.
Yeah. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the discussion of the First Street reconstruction project. Dan and I both assisted on putting this together, but at a last minute game time decision, he threw this one over at me because I've been kind of entrenched in the First Street. So First Street, as Mr. Wolf mentioned earlier, he talked about the history of First Street. First Street it's just such an extremely historical portion of downtown the Dalles. We provided a lot of history into this narrative. Really looking at the fact that First Street was the main corridor for the Dalles. There's been a lot of different changes that have happened over the course of these many years. There was a fire in 1891 that changed the landscape, the flood of 1894 that changed that landscape, the freeway being constructed, I-80, which is now I-84, which really created that separation now that we have between First Street and the river. But really it was also home to, most significantly, I would say it was home to Chinatown. After the freeway was erected, a lot of the commercial activity shifted over to Second Street or Highway 30. Today, the First Streets, really the history of First Street and the old construction of First Street, a lot of the characteristics of that are still very much in place. I was pulling up the other day in our GIS system. There is a water line in the ground installed in 1874. So there's a very, very old infrastructure along First Street. Part of that is wrapping around the historic Baldwin Saloon, where there was an elevated sidewalk that was sitting on top of steel reinforced concrete piers. If you go beneath that sidewalk, you will see the deterioration, as you can imagine, of all these years of old steel rusting away. As a result, we're starting to see just some overall deterioration of it's very significant, I would say, for the deterioration of the infrastructure out on First Street. So this deterioration led to recognizing in the urban renewal plan streetscaping along First Street as one of the priority projects. In 2007, the city and ODOT, the city was awarded and ODOT was awarded federal transportation funds of just under $1.6 million for these improvements. The city retained KPFF consulting engineers in 2007. The city is still working with KPFF on this project. This project really morphed into this Washington Street Plaza, which was a sunken plaza right at Washington Street, and it would allowed for a pedestrian tunnel to go underneath the railroad as well as the freeway and a connection to the Riverfront Trail. Throughout the years, that project was actually that portion of the project was removed from the scope due to overall cost. And with that, there was some federal funds that needed to be returned because that portion of the project wasn't going to be happening. In May, just this May 2022, there was some additional KPFF informed staff that ODOT had, with all the delays that had been experienced through this project, they mentioned that the additional requirements for this federal funding was going to add an additional 3 years to this project. And I think, many of you may remember just a couple of years ago now that the city and KPFF unanimously decided to terminate this agreement. And terminating that agreement, we were going to do the project in-house, hopefully save 3 years on it, save some money. And we were actually then ODOT submitted on behalf of the city an exemption request. We did not have to pay the funding, the federal funds that had been expended to date on this project. So these, multiple rescoping of this project has has been over time something that is probably more expensive than a typical project of this size. And in designing and engineering of all those years, the city and agency spent $1.5 million in design and engineering. And this is this is a five block, 6 block project. So in speaking with our engineers, this is definitely a number that is much higher than a typical project of this size, but it's all due to rescoping throughout the years. As mentioned just recently, $3.8 million is set aside in Fund 18 for the reconstruction project. At the current estimated cost, in the staff report mentioned 6.6. We will take a look at some of those design alternatives here shortly. And some of those at 6.6, that did not include archaeological work, right-of-way acquisition work. So that has been added to this updated information provided to you this evening. And an estimate, in our effort to, with all the discussions that we've been having about the available funds that the agency has, staff engaged with KPFF engineers to come up with some additional alternatives. These additional alternatives are not only rescoping or downscoping, if you will, some value engineering going into it, but also seeing how the city might be able to contribute to this project as well. The goal of it really is to see what we can do of the money that's left for urban renewal, this possibility of finishing this project, as well as providing a lot of money, or the majority, hopefully, to private investments. So private properties, and doing so, we would do it through our incentive program, which we established just 2 years ago. And with that, I would like to share the supplemental document that was sent out on Friday. And we apologize for the delay in getting that information to you, but it was hot off the press when we got the information. It came in as 6 alternatives, but in the last minute decision, we asked for a 7th alternative just so we could throw around some of these options for you. So up on the screen is the list of 7 separate alternatives. And these alternatives, we really, Dan and I working with KPFF engineers. And before I get too far into it, I did this last time. We have KPFF online right now. Is Paul in the waiting room by chance? There he is.
I'm here.
Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Happy to be here, Josh.
You probably didn't need to be there for the whole history of the whole thing, but your team's been there for a long time. But Paul has really helped us out quite a bit just recently, taking a look at this. As we've mentioned in the past, we have 95% plans of the full scoped out project. And this has been the project that we've been moving forward with now for a few years. But we wanted to take a look at some different design alternatives to try to see how we can move forward with the intent, with the original intent, best we can of the project with the available funds that the agency has. So in looking at these 1 through 4, these are the full project. This is the full project length. And I just let me scroll down and show you some of these pictures really quick so we can get a better idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about full scope and everything like that. So this is effectively a full scoped project. This is from Union Street at the railroad crossing to Laughlin Street. This is how the project engineering team has been working on this fully scoped project, at least in this extent area, for the past 2 years. This is another, and we'll jump back up and take a look at all of them when we look at cost, but this is just showing you that these are 2, these top slides here represent the fully scoped project. This is an alternative we wanted the team to take a look at. This is an alternative. We consider this to be a half scope. This is the area that's addressing the most critical infrastructure at this time. As we talked about the Baldwin Saloon sidewalks, the other sidewalks in the area that are deteriorating. So this is a half scope. This is kind of a mixture of the two, but what it is the areas, and my apologies for not mentioning it, the areas in blue would be the areas for urban renewal contribution. The areas in red are City of the Dalles contribution. This scope here is kind of it is the full extent of the project, but it really, when you're going from Washington to Laughlin Street, it's really addressing sidewalks more so than the infrastructure that's underneath. That's the infrastructure that's inside the street, which would be covered through that fully scoped project. And then another alternative here is this last alternative, which is focused. This would be looking at, of course, the deteriorating infrastructure on this side, but also when you go over at the Laughlin Street side in front of what was Sedition Brewing, that sidewalk infrastructure is in very bad shape as well. So to go back to the top to show the numbers. After the first presentation that Dan put together, these couple options here, I think the first few options probably can't be funded by the agency. Even if the agency were to use the funds we have available, it would almost wipe out all the remaining funds that the agency has. So that options, I think 1 through 4 at this point. Staff probably isn't leaning toward a recommendation of options 1 through 4. We just wanted to get these options to see what it was actually going to look like. And some other points I'd like to point out with this is the city cost and the SDC cost. And the exercise here was to figure out the costs that could be covered by the city. So the 590 is in discussions with the city manager that we've had. The 590 would be the city's justification to cover sidewalk improvements surrounding city-owned properties. So these are the sidewalk improvements that surround the parking lots on First Street. The $670,000 for SDC costs in alternative number 1, this is in the event the water line was upsized from an 8-inch line to a 12-inch line, we could use system development charges to pay for that upsize. But a like-for-like replacement wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to use system development charges. The reason we requested to look at alternative 1 is because it's, in a way, it's future-proofing the street. I mean, this zone, it's in the CBC zone. It does allow for 55-foot tall buildings. It allows for mixed-use developments. So in the future, the Dalles may develop significantly along First Street. So this creates, you have a 12-inch water line in the ground that creates for future development of ease. Instead of building the road, development comes in, may need to cut into the road at a later date. And then looking at option number 4. Option number 4 is one that we threw out there because this idea of what's in the plan is First Street is streetscaping. So we looked at it really as that, what's above the ground or what's below the ground. And streetscaping, you could say streetscaping is everything that you see above ground. Pipes in the ground, not so much listed as a streetscaping activity. But the other things I will point out with these figures is the system development charge costs. They are not budgeted or planned in the city's budget. So the 670,000 and the 1.8 almost in alternative 4, these are not contemplated by the Public Works Department, by the city's the water, sewer funds or street funds. But these are just showing that these are our potential contributions in the event that those funds were to be available. So really moving after Dan's presentation, as I mentioned, looking into well, before I get into 5, 6, and 7, we also looked at alternative 3. And alternative 3 is the full project, trying to stay as much as we can true to the full project that we've been working on. And this value engineering exercise occurred. And what we did is we took some of those additional streetscaping elements and went for a more affordable route. So this would include removing paver tiles that are proposed. Instead of having paver tiles on the landscaping strip, removing those, replacing them with concrete. That can be up to almost $150,000 price reduction of this project. Removal of tree grates. Currently, we have tree grates on our street trees downtown. If you remove the tree grates, there's a significant cost reduction there of up to $125,000. The removal of soil cells. Soil cells are basically a structure in the ground for our trees. So removing soil cells could be a reduction of up to $150,000. And also what is being proposed currently is the wrought iron fencing to be installed similar to the Lewis and Clark Festival Park. Currently, the plan would be to have the whole railroad side with wrought iron fencing. Well, obviously it looks, well, I personally think it looks really nice, but if you look at that cost there, you could trade wrought iron fencing for a black chain link fence and probably reduce the cost to $225,000. The other things to keep in mind here is there's additional, estimated fees, the asterisk, the 1 asterisk, some additional fees. There's $500,000 that could be shared with the city, and this is for construction administration. So this is for the day-to-day activities of someone being out there from staff monitoring the work that's being done. Obviously, if you have an engineering firm from Portland coming out, the time they're charging, coming and going, the time that they're there, obviously more cost efficient, more cost effective to have that being handled in-house. We happen to have a development and construction inspector in our public works department. So this cost here, $500,000 here, could also come off of total costs. I know there's a lot. So Paul, did you want to chime in on that by chance?
Just want to clarify on the construction admin, and that was a great breakdown, Josh. For the CA, that would most likely be $250,000 that could be saved if instead of hiring a CA firm, having that portion done by a city staff member. There would still need to be engineering, civil engineering, archaeological, structural, geotechnical, construction admin services, but those would happen as needed during the project at specific times instead of day to day. And those $250,000 remaining design fees is what's currently budgeted for the remaining work that still needs to be done with right-of-way, archaeological, and rail coordination, as well as some design.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
When he says rail coordination, is that also, you got to work with the railroad and establish where the right of way is, or we know where it is, or?
Paul, the question here is the rail coordination, and this is separate from, we have an approved permit. We were approved by, is it ODOT Rail that approved our permit just recently?
Yep, for the crossing, yes.
And then, so the other rail coordination, what else is involved in that?
So what's involved in there is getting permission from UPRR essentially to do construction by the railroad. There's a portion of First Street that abuts the rail right-of-way. And so that would require a temporary construction easement for the entire, if we went with one of options 1 through 4, or excuse me, alternatives 1 through 4, in order to put in the wrought iron fence. and the curb along the north side of First Street. And so that does require coordination with rail, getting permission to do that with a TCE. And then also the other portion is what I had sent you earlier today, Josh. I'm blanking on what it was called. The maintenance consent letter. So that would be to do maintenance along First Street on portions that essentially, since the right of way for First Street and the rail right of way is not very clean, the city does own portions of property where the rail is going through, but the rail has, I guess, they have permission to be on there because the rail is there. And so maintenance through the portion of First Street that the rail also owns, the portion of First Street is owned by the rail. Our design is providing maintenance of that street. And so that would be the portions that go from Washington to Laughlin, and that would be grind and inlay for maintenance.
So effectively, what's pointed out here is when you look at the half project, there is less coordination, well, no coordination or less coordination, I would say, with the railroad, because the railroad, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, the railroad's right of way is actually between Washington, basically where First Street is, that is actually railroad right of way between Washington and Laughlin.
Right.
And as Paul was mentioning here, there's a little bit of a flip flop. Some of the city owns land, the city's right of way is in portions of where the railroad is, and portions of First Street located on railroad right of way. So we entertained this idea with this project of doing a land swap with UP. That conversations really didn't go too far on that one. There are some requirements that UP has when they are talking about exchanging property. And if property is located within 20 feet of a railroad right of way, they are not interested in doing any kind of land swap or any kind of purchase. So we explored that idea. It still could be explored more, but it was something that we chose to. It's not going to be anything that impacts our project, but that's another thing there, that when you do that half project, you're not dealing with the railroad right of way.
He said that a portion of the street is on the railroad right of way today.
Correct.
And that portion you're saying is not the primary area we're looking at, is further down?
No. So the portion, well, if you look at the full scope, but basically that area, railroad right of way is from Washington to Laughlin.
More or less. Yep.
Yeah.
Would you please speak into your mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. So part of it, even no matter what the railroad, if they're cooperative or not, you're saying we could do, and some of the other stuff would require them to give us permission.
Yeah, it's more coordination. So the full scope requires more coordination with UP.
Correct.
So then we look at options 5, 6, and 7. And as mentioned, after, Dan and I were working with the spreadsheet, really felt that kind of honing in on 5, 6, and 7 just seemed to be the options that the agency could most easily consider. And keep in mind, when Paul and his team put these numbers together, these were full details. These were paver tiles. These were the use of the tree grates, use of the wrought iron fencing. That was only value engineered in alternative 3. So at the end of the day, alternatives 5, 6, and 7, the cost could be a little bit cheaper if we decide to trade out some of those design elements.
At what point will we be making those decisions, or will you make those decisions and bring them to the board?
Yeah, so you know, the design of the project has really been something handled at the staff level for all these years.
Right.
And the reason I wanted to bring all these in front of you now is because of the funding crunch that we're in. All of these options, no matter where we go, staff would still need to discuss with city staff on this. I mean, anything that we do, unless it's the full scope, we are moving away from the original intent of the project. So there will need to be a change in the current plans that we have. So it would just be something that I would be confirming with our city manager and public works director, letting them know in the event that we went with a half project, that was the intent. Because there is pipe in the ground that would not be replaced if you're doing a half project.
So is KPFF also done engineering and stuff when we're talking about the lowest elevation parking areas or
In the parking lot itself, the extent of engineering that's been done is the replacement of the existing walls, the existing retaining walls that are there. So about, basically the engineering that's been done are the footings, if you can imagine the footings to put the retaining walls in. So not too much of the remainder of the parking lot has been any
So it's
engineering work on.
not really something that he's got a lot of input on at this time. The guy we have online.
Input as far as?
Well, so one of my concerns with that area is we don't want to be years from now looking at it going, well, we shoulda, coulda, woulda. If we would have thought, we would have designed it so that when it gets flooded with silt and water and everything, it's not that hard to clean.
So that's looking at that was not the extent of this First Street project. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just a reminder that we're talking about urban renewal right now, not city maintenance of that street. And this is closely tied with our decision about how much we have to invest in other things and other priorities for the board. So it's you need this information to decide if this is a priority over other things, but it's not a decision to make independent of the other decisions we have on our discussion item.
Let me back up the bus because I heard that there was pipe underneath there that was put in the 1880s.
Yeah, 1874.
And you just said that part of the plan was not to include replacement of some of those pipes.
Well, the portion, if the half project, if we moved forward with the half project, then there would be ultimately a trade-off in completing some infrastructure work. But at the current extent, the full project is not something that the agency could afford.
But if we did number 5, then the pipe would be replaced.
Not alternative 5. And Paul, do you
So,
know the age of the
Josh,
pipe?
I don't know the age of the pipe offhand.
What is the condition of the pipe? Is it still being used?
The pipes still are being used. Yep.
And let me check on those numbers right now just to make sure whether or not the water line replacement was the full water line replacement, even in the half projects, because of the age of the pipe. Let me check real quick on that.
So that is water lines, not sewage or anything.
They're water lines.
Wastewater.
Correct. Yeah, there's no sewer
right.
line in there. Yeah.
And
seems like logical that if we have that open, to replace when we have the opportunity, like what you're just saying, is that a missed opportunity. I don't know.
You upgrade the diameter, then you are also planning for some later development that might occur. It might be 10 or 20 years down the road. It might be sooner.
Wouldn't that be logical to increase the size capacity?
If we had the money to do it.
yeah.
Okay.
And again, we're talking about water lines.
But-
and that's a city.
Correct.
And in my opinion, that is a city thing, not a urban renewal, not a place to spend urban renewal dollars, but it's something we have to think about because these aren't typically, if this project got brought to us, I'm sorry, I'm going to steal your thing,
That's okay.
Stacy.
That's okay.
If this got brought to us now as a project, we'd say no, that this is not appropriate use of urban renewal dollars. We have been handed this project and we're sort of being guilt tripped into
Oh,
finishing it up and doing it with urban renewal dollars. And I just want the board to be mindful of that when we're thinking about, we're wrapping up the agency. We have businesses in town that are coming to us with good ideas that will help build our economics downtown. And we have to decide, we don't have enough to go around. So are we going to put it into pipes where there's potentially other funding sources who, you know, are obviously not jumping up and down to spend the money on it, but we shouldn't necessarily be jumping up and down either.
Well, I think you're right. The city's going to be very much involved in the piping and stuff, but we'll have to coordinate with them so that the pipe is done before this is finished and it's not more expensive to do the pipe after whether we pick number 5 or number 1 or whatever. And if it's going to cost a whole lot more to fix that pipe when we're done, that's not desired. And we have to coordinate with the city, I would say.
so when you were explaining cost savings, you were looking at wrought iron to chain link. So there was cost savings. So that money then could be turned over or used for other applications in the project. Correct?
Yeah, effectively. Yeah. So alternative 3 is looking at those, is looking at the full scope of the project, just some more affordable options, I guess you could say. And in 1 second here, let me check. Paul, did you have a number on that, the scope with that water line?
Yeah. One second here. There's a couple couple columns. Total for UR. Let's see. Yeah, that did include the water lines and the utilities. So there's water, irrigation. So replacement of the water line, adding irrigation for the trees, or the newly installed trees, or the trees that would be installed with the project, I should say. And I'm just checking the drainage, and then all of the storm drainage as well is included in that number.
Is included in
The value,
alternatives.
in alternatives 1 through 4. And I believe 5 through 7 as well. Just double checking all of them. Should be.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to make sure I understand what he was saying, even in the half projects, the water lines that we were concerned
Right.
about from 1874 would be replaced.
They are replaced, yeah. So, and thank you for that clarification, Paul. So looking at the full project compared to the half project, it's a lot of it is looking at what's on the surface. The full project has a sidewalk that connects along the First Street parking lots over to Laughlin. And that would, with a half project, sidewalks would stop at Washington. We'd basically just be replacing the sidewalks that are on Washington.
Well, right now I'm looking at what I would prefer is number 5 with a 12-inch water line. Is that unreasonable to try to do that, or somebody want to talk me out of that?
Commissioner Hagee?
Okay. This is very confusing. I'll tell you why. There's a couple things. If I take a big picture look at it, it's like, I'm not even sure we can afford any of these, or I mean, maybe we could, but I think if you look at the urban renewal costs, it varies. The full project is 5.8 million, right? And then the half project is 5 million. So, I mean, just at the surface, you'd think like, okay, if we're 5.8 for the full thing, and then we're doing half of it and it's 5. I mean, I know that probably is not, but it's just the terminology that that is here, I think it's confusing because I don't really understand what that means, half project. I mean, look at the picture and it shows half of the area, but it's certainly not half of the cost, right? Half of the cost would be, you know,
3.5.
Expensive part of the project is Union to Washington. That's where
Yeah.
almost all the costs are tied up. And that's also where a large part of the urban renewal commitment needs to be made. Bringing in the city is that lesser half, that other half that costs proportionally less because you're not doing the retaining walls, for instance, on the eastern section of the project. You don't have the fundamental costs associated with it that you do on the western side, Union to Washington.
yeah, but I mean, that's even more confusing to me because it's like the full project, you know, is 5.8 million. And the full project, when the city comes in and pays some money, is 6.4 million. It goes up, you know. I mean, I'm just saying, I know there's a lot of stuff behind this. I'm just saying that from my perspective, it's very confusing about what's happening and what's being paid for, what's in the scope, what's not in the scope. And I kind of, when I looked at it earlier today, I was kind of thinking the full project makes sense for the city to do, maybe. You know, maybe we help a little bit, but in my mind, I'm kind of with Darcy that it's not really the kind of project from an urban renewal standpoint that makes sense for urban renewal to do. There's a lot of other things I think we could do as urban renewal. I'm not sure where they are, but there's a lot of stuff even that came in, and we're going to talk about it later about the what street is that? What was all the ideas or whatever? What was that? We're going to talk about later. No, the Tony's building, but just the Tony's building and the federal. Yeah. I mean, so there's a lot of stuff there that, like, when I just read this stuff, it's like, well, that seems more interesting from an economic standpoint or an urban renewal standpoint than just doing First Street. And maybe it's just because First Street seems kind of boring, which maybe isn't fair. You know, it did seem interesting back when it started, when it was, you know, access to the river from the middle of town and stuff. But now it's just feeling more and more like it's a city project that, you know, the city needs to figure out if they want to do or how they're going to do it. Maybe we are part of that. Maybe we're not. I don't know. I'm very confused, honestly. And even when I look at these numbers, just try to assess, like, which one do I like to do? My answer is kind of like none of them. I mean, you know, I understand the project's important and maybe we need to do it, but I think as a community, we need to figure out how to do it. I'm not sure urban renewal needs to do it, but we need to figure that out. It's just, this is not an easy decision. I mean, it's not an easy decision. You guys spent a lot of time on it, but this is not the kind of project that makes me really excited about an urban renewal project. It doesn't get me excited. And it maybe not get anybody excited. There's a whole bunch of stuff we heard from the community and from people out there, like, those seem exciting. Let's do those, you know? But this is, I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but it's troubling to me that it's kind of transformed into kind of a public works project, you know, infrastructure project. And there's obviously some other stuff. It's just hard to understand what the scope is and what those kind of things are. Bottom line for me is I'm pretty confused.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And apologies on the confusion. with it.
No worries.
Yeah.
I know it's very complicated to try to break it down and parse it out and give a bunch of options. It's just, I'm confused.
Stacy, do you have something to add? to
Yeah,
that?
I was just gonna add, that's been my thought all along as the project has morphed. You know, what the original plan was looks much more like the things that we've sat here on at this dais and done. And somehow, and maybe before my time, it's moved into something that looks completely different. I mean, it feels more like a safety need versus an urban renewal need. And I think that's where I have concerns, is that it feels more out of our scope than in the scope. And I realize it's still covered by the plan, but it doesn't look like those things that we're used to seeing and used to doing. And I'm not sure how we got from here to here. And I know, Dan, I've asked you that question before, because to me, it's still not clear on how we've got here.
We have inherited
Right. And I get it.
decisions. First Street started out as a fundamentally completely different thing.
Sure, a different project.
And
right.
we could go into the politics of that, but pulling out the Washington Street Plaza really did, I think, in my opinion, cut out some of the guts of an urban
Right.
renewal project.
Right, exactly.
And it turned it into what we have now. All this information that we have, we're probably throwing too much out here between all of these different staff reports. We're doing a big data dump here, trying to keep you as well informed on all of the different issues we're facing at the staff level, trying to navigate, okay, at the end of the day, how do we balance everything that's happened with what we have now, with what we might be able to pull off? And apologies on the confusion.
Well, it's
A lot of data.
Can I just
So-
one, sorry, can I just one,
Yep, one more, and then I'm going to call on you, Kristen.
Sorry,
I see you.
sorry. Can I just, you made a comment, Dan, and before I forget, and I think it was either directed at Board Member Hagee or McLaughlin, when you said the first few blocks is I don't remember the words used. I'm sorry, I should have wrote it down, but the responsibility of urban renewal, or that's urban renewal's commitment. Thank you. And I guess I struggle with, help me understand where you're coming from. I mean, where does it say that's
Go back
this
to
group
the
responsibility?
in the 2009 plan, and it specifically references streetscaping.
Sure,
So there's a difference between streetscaping and infrastructure.
sure.
Streetscaping be the above ground visible. But that was noted as a First Street, Second, Third, and Fourth were all noted as basically bonded encumbrances. And technically it's a city bond, not urban renewal, but most of that city bond went to urban renewal projects. And so in that sense, urban renewal is on the hook really to repay that city obligation. That was $13 million in 2009. In terms of the Union to Washington Street, that's the safety issue. That's the most expensive part. I was trying to get across is of the entire First Street length. The more expensive part of it is that block from Union to Washington, because you've got the hollow sidewalks and you've got the need for pilings and the engineering associated with it. Whereas the eastern part is more flat. You're not going into the retaining walls and things like that. It's a lesser proportion of the cost.
Okay, so Kristen, I want to hear from you, and then I'll go back to Commissioner Hagee.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thanks, fellas, for your work. It sounds like you've done a lot of it. I know I'm relatively new here, so I'm trying to get up to speed. I just have a couple of questions. Darcy hit on one, and I think so last month there was a question that we be presented with some information about what this project would look like, more from an urban renewal standpoint, if the city were to pick up the other costs of that. And I'm not necessarily finding that information located on this page. I apologize. I wasn't able to locate these alternatives in the materials that were sent by email, so I'm not sure if they were. However, I'm just wondering if we will be able to see maybe an option that would allow us to weigh in on some of the items that would be more appropriate for urban renewal as opposed to infrastructure, and when that might be available.
Yeah, I can go. Thank you. I can comment on that. I think maybe what you're referencing is the alternative number 4. And this is one that was specifically taking a look at what would be considered as streetscaping, which is included in the urban renewal plan. So that is everything above ground compared to everything below ground. So that cost here, that's a total cost of just about $7 million. And in that $7 million, $5.2 million is actually streetscaping, what would be classified as streetscaping. Does that answer the question for you? Because I think we kind of went around on that idea.
Yeah, I think that helps quite a bit. I think I am also falling at the same place as Scott Hagee. Kind of confusion over the cost there. If it is $5.2 million, why that cost would be the same to urban renewal as the half project would be, and where those city funds go in the meantime.
Yeah, so the cost is, I think we touched on it, the Union to Washington Street are far more expensive than Washington to Laughlin Street. Far more expensive due to the fact that there's those retaining walls that need to be reconstructed. So the $5.2 million is for all of the streetscaping that would be from Union to Laughlin Street, compared to that half street project, you would just be looking at Union to Washington and you wouldn't be touching on anything else. Does that answer the
Great.
question?
It does. And then I guess, so for my own kind of understanding on that alternative for the city cost of 1.79 there, is that something that would need to be discussed further, or are those funds that are then committed to that project if this is already like kind of the choice that we make tonight?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah. So, any option here, we would have to, we'll take back and discuss with the city. That 1.79, not committed at all to this project. That is something that the city would have to move around from maybe other committed projects that they've already planned on going through over this next couple years with their capital improvement plan. That's the thing, to point out on this is that, the sentiment here is this may be maybe considered more of a city project, not to coerce the board one way or the other, but the city has fully intended on the agency paying for this project for years. So it is not in or planned on in the capital improvement plan. So I just kind of want us to kind of see both sides of that after, I spoke with the public works director about this just this last week. So although we're calling out that I would say that these are potential city contributions, they are not anything budgeted at this point.
Awesome. And then sorry, go ahead, Darcy.
No, go ahead, Krista. I'm sorry. I thought you're done.
No, sorry, last point here. So then just confirming then, am I correct in maybe saying that alternative 4 would kind of be the compromise solution where nobody is happy, but maybe it might be the best route through?
That's a tough question. I don't know.
I'd say no.
Yeah, I would say no.
Great. Thank you. I'm just trying to understand this from a somewhat outside perspective and limited information that's quite confusing to hear.
Bring the questions coming. We're more than happy to answer all of them.
Thank you so much for your help. I appreciate it.
So I would say even with a half project number 5, it's not showing any potential city contribution. And yet we're talking about those hollowed out sidewalks and that being a safety issue. So to me, that's a concern. The other thing that I'm going to go ahead and bring up is the fact that, yes, today the city doesn't have it in their budget, but the city has increased taxes. Google has come back on the tax roll. We also have SIP dollars that we're currently in the middle of deciding what to do with. And so I think that we need to focus. There's 3 city representatives here and there's a county representative here. And we wear 2 hats, but also when we're on this board, we're in charge. We're responsible to the people for urban renewal dollars, for those dollars that were dedicated to this. And so I think we need to be careful what hat we're wearing and not get too confused about trying to serve two masters at the same time. And that's my input. If I know we're kind of we have a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. If you have this great spreadsheet, we can either, I'm going to give this up to the board to what you guys want to do. We can plug some numbers in and see how that affects our other funds that we are concerned about. So you can see that maybe more clearly, or if you want to digest this some more and bring it back at the next meeting, we can do that as well. Cause I think we're going to talk about the plan as well at the end tonight. And we were challenged in what order to put this on the agenda because everything is really like a puzzle. And so there's not really a clear linear way to follow that. So thoughts from you guys about what would help you the most? Scott?
Well, I just had one more comment on this. When I look at it, the full project, the urban renewal cost was 5.8. The lowest one of all these options was 5 million. When I look at that and think about the money we have, it's the lion's share of what we have left regardless. I mean, whether it's 5.8 or 5, it's most of the money we have left. And we, if we do any of these options, that's the reality is where we're going to be committing most of the money to finishing First Street, regardless of the option. That's my sense. So that's why it's like, I think it's best to maybe move on. No, we now know what this kind of is. And if we move on to look at the other things, then maybe we can put them all together and go, okay, what do we want to do?
Yes. And the other thing is there's sort of an artificial timeline also on First Street that was handed to us, that First Street is still going to be there, still owned by the city, and they can do it later if they like. That's just my thought. So I am going to give 3 minutes per person. I see a couple people in the audience looking for some input. So Claire and then Michael. Yeah.
Is First Street goes forward, are you still going to have fun?
I
No.
apologize.
be
It's
slim.
completely inaudible on this side. Is there a way to give her a
Oh.
microphone, please?
Microphone on.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, is it on?
I just want to know if there's money enough to do both Tony's and First Street. I'm hearing no.
I think we got it. So I would say depends on what we choose with First Street, but there's not very much money left. And we also still have our other program that we are concerned about. Yeah.
Hi, Chair Long.
Yes.
Hi, it's Jonathan. I
Hi,
couldn't
Jonathan.
hear anything. Hi, I couldn't hear anything that the
Microphone on.
commenter just said.
Oh,
I
you
don't think
couldn't
that
hear.
mic was on for some
Okay.
reason.
Also,
So that was Claire Graper, and she was asking us if, as she was saying, she was looking forward to what came out of the QR code for the Tony's building and site, and then asking if we went forward with First Street, if there would be any money at all left for helping with the development of the Tony's lot.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate it and putting that on the record. Thank you.
also.
Yes, thank you.
There you go, but it's difficult to hear those people on Zoom. Can we turn the mic up? I can't hear.
Michael Leash. Scott makes a really good point in regards to the cost of the project, as well as is it a city project, is it urban renewal project? The degradation of the sidewalks and the retaining walls on First Street, especially from Union to Court and Washington, but especially between Union and Court, it's a 70-year-old problem. And is that an urban renewal has been not around that long. So do they own tremendous degradation of infrastructure that is they're not responsible for? And the retaining wall is bulging, and it will come down. I think it's probably got a 3 to 5 year life on it. And maybe if it comes down sooner, it's $1 million project immediately for the city. So I think that we really need to involve the city into some of these budgeting things, because urban renewal should pay for pavers and benches and trees and grades and the beautiful stuff. It's not meant to be paying for infrastructure. And I think we should upgrade to a 12-inch pipe and have the city put it in, because it makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else that I didn't know about? Okay, Rick.
Can I ask KPFF a question? I'm Richard Wolf, in Dalles, Oregon. Where is the pipe located?
Within First Street.
Yes. Where?
Yeah.
Along the railroad track,
No, the survey shows that it is on the northern half of First Street, like within the pavement.
Under the sidewalk?
Within the pavement.
On the sidewalk side?
No.
No, on the north side, the north side,
Riverside.
so the railroad side of the street. If you were to
Could
cut it
be an
down.
option to run a pipe on the others, like in the park. It's a low level just
So-
as food for thought.
So, yeah.
I'm
go-
not understanding the cost projection in what we're buying. What I understand is that the people have a say of what's going on down there, and I really don't have a clue why you want to tear up a good road. We're talking about the sidewalk and the retaining walls. I don't understand why we're able to voice on this. We should have Public Works here to look at that retaining wall. It looks well to me. The road looks well. The sidewalk was wood. It was a boardwalk. And they did not want to haul in basalt rock. The rock was dug out of the holes. There's not an archaeologist needed, but we have to have one. The pipe, if you disturb that ballast salt rock, it's with a shovel, it's going to affect both sides also. You dig that rock out by hand, it can be real expensive. How to lay pipe in there is going to be very expensive. I believe that the cost projection would be not a no, but a hell no. Not until we know what we're getting as a city. We don't know what you guys are doing. We don't know if you have builders actually involved in this other than an engineering firm out of California or these California prices. We need to investigate. So there's not enough information for us to work with. And we've brought up more questions. And could never do this in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. So I will just say that we have I know that you do this or did this for a living, and you have a lot of knowledge that the rest of us don't have. We do have to rely on our staff and our engineers that we pay and hire. And I do feel like we've had good representation there. But I'm going to turn it back over. Look, Josh, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Our public works staff, Mr. Wolf has looked at these plans many, many times. Our city engineer has been working on this project for over 15 years in every different scope. KPFF has been committed to this project since 2007 when they first came on. This is a licensed and respected engineering firm all over the West Coast. We happen to be working with the Portland branch. So they are out here not only behind their computers working through all these plans, but they are out here digging holes in the ground, testing things. This is the information that they are providing. A full entire scope of the project, I'd be more than happy to show if you want to stop by our office. We have a full breakdown that was provided in the previous, in last May's board meeting. The plans themselves are very extensive. I would be more than happy to share those. We could take a look at them. But if you want to look at dollar for dollar what's being paid, we have those numbers. So that is something that is definitely available. We're not shooting from the hip on these numbers, and there's been a lot of time put into this, and a lot of not only assisting KPFF with their engineering, we've had geotechnical engineers out there, we've had archaeologists out there. So you can imagine a 15-year project. There's been a lot of work. $1.5 million has gone into this project. So that's, I mean, more than happy to share the information if you want to stop by. Depending on how many, yeah, it's a big packet there. So we'll see. We'll charge you by the print. No.
He's being sarcastic. Come by and see him. Yeah, he.
Already asked
Okay. Okay.
before I came here.
Okay. So let's chat afterward. Okay. like we usually do. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to move on to our last two discussion items, and then I would like to circle back at the end of that and give staff direction, because I feel like we're not ready to give staff direction on so far.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to the next one of our favorite topics, the Tony's building site. Located at 401, 407 East Second Street, consists of two 0.14 acre tax parcels zoned central business commercial. I won't read the entire staff report. You've got it before you. Going back, we presented in the October 2023 board meeting, we requested board guidance in identifying elements for a request for proposal to develop the former Tony's site. Threw out some different ideas there: upper story residential, street level retail, etc. We had some feedback from Basalt Commons at that time, expressing some concerns over potential residential development. At the same time, the Basalt Commons was developing its own capital stack. And so the board requested that we postpone the RFP issuance at that time. We came back in January with the idea of a request for expressions of interest, or an RFP, or parcel sale, parking lot, some different options. Again, board asked us to conduct some additional research, including a survey, a public survey, which we conducted. And thanks to Ann Moorhead, I believe she's in the audience. All right, hello, Ann, Special Projects Coordinator and social media genius and technology guru and things like that. We put together a QR code. We put banners up on the Tony's site, which with a QR code that linked to a website for people to complete surveys. And we got a whole lot of responses, 248, and had to weed out a few that were not appropriate for a public forum, but most of them were. And in your board packet, you should have a printout of the entire set of these. It makes for some interesting reading. There's some really cool, innovative. I really want to express appreciation to 248 people. There might be some duplication in there, not very much, who took the time to put very thoughtful, considered, polite ideas, sincere ideas for how to approach this thing. That level of commitment, when you do a survey, if you have a few people come back, that's nice. We under 248. I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
The visual representation that Ann provided, a word cloud on page 68 of your board packet, provides some weight to the relative abundance of the words as presented. Now, a caution on that: parking is big. It might mean, well, we don't want parking, and so that word shows up, or in addition to parking, things like that. So look at the bar chart on page 69, where Ann has taken the trouble to go out and actually put some weighted averages on these. And looking at that bar chart, and then also on the following page, we have some breakdown of that, the top items. Park green space had the most references at 1. Community event gathering space came in at number 2. Residential 3. Retail 4. 5. Eating space came in after that. Look at the following page on page 70 of your packet, and we start to go into some of the detail. And again, Ann has provided these summaries. Park Plaza, Public Square. Respondents frequently emphasize the importance of having accessible open spaces like parks, plazas, and public squares. Keep in mind, Federal Street is right next to Tony's site. And so there may be some difficulty in people trying to visualize, okay, what's Tony's site? What could Federal Street be? What they might be together. Those are areas of flexibility, I think, as we interpret the results. But still, number 2, community event space. Strong demand for community gathering spaces, event areas for social interactions, public events, concert, communal activities can take place. Coming in number 3, residential housing. The need for residential development, including apartments and housing, was a common theme. Participants highlighted the importance of addressing housing shortages and providing convenient living spaces within the community, indicating a significant demand for residential options. Number 4, retail commercial. Many respondents mentioned the desire for retail commercial spaces, shops, businesses, mixed-use buildings that combine living spaces with amenities like retail stores and cafes. Suggest a preference for a vibrant, multifunctional community hub offering both residential and commercial benefits. 5, food, drink, restaurant, food carts, eating space, all of the above. 6, kids, youth, children, teens, family-oriented. We're getting into, again, the number of times these words come up and capturing those and trying to perhaps lending some thematic ideas to whatever we might do at that space. So, of course, the challenge with the survey, when you ask, people respond, and then what do you do with it? I know many of you were probably in town when the high school went through the process of picking a mascot, and the kids came up with an idea that was rejected, and guess what? We had eventually adopted that idea. So where do we go from here? We're not asking, we didn't provide a series of alternatives here. We wanted to present these for feedback. And first, see what do you think? We've talked about RFPs. We've talked about selling it. We've talked about doing something else entirely about it. What would be the relationship with Federal Street Plaza if we had the money for Federal Street Plaza? Like your thoughts first. Does that sound okay?
I can't see you, Kristen. You have thoughts? Those are
I'm
okay.
sorry,
Oh,
one more time.
oh, I said I couldn't see you, so I called on you first to see if you had any thoughts or feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting kind of seeing these, and I read through them a little bit earlier and thought it was interesting also kind of contemplating the Federal Street project and just the ability to deliver the Federal Street project in addition to something at Tony's in conjunction with the First Street project. So I think that's something that I'm going to kind of be considering and maybe won't have an opinion on quite yet.
Great. Well, thanks. That was coming in on it. Thank you. Anyone else? Scott?
Okay, so this was great, right? Lots of great information. When I think about, the Tony's building, as a site, right? So I kind of broke it down into 2 different categories. There's one category that's basically what I would define as like non-revenue, non-tax based, public funded, right? And so if you look at the responses, the majority of the responses were in that, what I would define as that category, which is great because I think a lot of the things that were said were really good. They described how it'd be used or what it'd be used for and stuff. And actually, as I was going through, somebody did mention a merry-go-round. I was thinking, wow, that seems like a better place for the carousel project, But the other thing is when I step back and go, this is all great. It's like we're back to the money, right? So it's like all great ideas, non-revenue tax-based stuff. But if we go that direction, we had to figure out, it's one thing to say, that's what we want to do. It's another thing to say, this is how we're going to pay for it. And sometimes more importantly, this is how we're going to maintain it, right? So even if you build something, if you build a park or whatever it might be, you have to be able to have the resources to keep that thing in a condition so that it's a, gem of the community. So that was kind of my thinking on, particularly on the non-revenue, non-tax based public funded side. And I think there were some wonderful ideas and some great descriptions in there and a lot of things I'm like, yeah. But then I always came back to like, okay, well, how do we want to pay for it as a community? And maybe there's lots of ways we can do that. But I think that's an important component of making a decision. If we're not going to let the private sector do something with that, and tell us what they can and will do with it, then we need to figure out how we're going to fund it. The other side is I still kind of feel like I'm still interested in asking, the public sector, what would you do with it? I mean, obviously we could put some parameters around it. We could provide them with this information, but at the end of the day, we don't really unless we're going to pay for it, we don't determine what it is, whether it be food and drink, retail, commercial, whatever. I mean, that's what we ask the private sector. Is this something of interest? And is there something you want to do here? And then we can assess it and go, we like that, or maybe we don't like that. So, but it was all great stuff. I think it's a great exercise, but it is, what do we do now?
I think that is kind of it. We don't have money. We know that now, which we didn't know at the beginning of the process, but we also have control over what happens to it, including maybe nothing for a while if the right thing doesn't come along. Downtown property doesn't come up very often.
Yeah.
So something to think about.
It was the kind of thing, thinking about when the county and the city met and the process we're in now. I mean, it is the kind of project that potentially, we could say, this is a great project, let's do this. I mean, there are resources out there that can do this kind of stuff. I think it's important to figure out who's going to do it and how does it get done. And like I said, as important as anything, how's it going to be maintained so that it's this nice thing for the rest of humanity or whatever.
And so now that we have some feedback, maybe it's appropriate to do a request for concept or something to see what comes in while the agency is still here and can make a decision on that. Even if we don't add funding, we can still have the input of controlling what goes into our downtown and how that impacts the beauty and the economics. Did you? Of course. Why do I?
Why? All right.
Tim.
Well, the prospects of having the carousel on that, I had not considered that. But if you think about the location, it's in the heart of the downtown. You have the old transportation building that I think is going to be vacated by county moving to no. What if our transportation hub, not the links, they remain where they're at, but somehow the Greyhound and the bus, everything comes to the downtown, and you develop a green space next to that lot. If you had the carousel, a green space, a park area, plus you had some type of transportation hub, tourism in that location, then what you do is when you have events like Cherry Festival, then you work around that space. What I'd like to say is some of these things are great ideas, but we're already developing. If you look at entertainment bowling with Todd Carpenter, he's still looking at the subterranean. Those are options for the developing of those things. So you meet the needs of the community right there. Entertainment, we have the Granada, which is in the central part of our downtown. What we do is we encourage and enhance what we have. And so when you're looking at new development, I'm just looking at what's the vision? What would you want? And especially from the side of the freeway where people are looking into our city, what a great thing to have is a building that's in the heart. And, we stand proud and people will come off the freeway if we have a reason for them to visit the downtown. So it's an opportunity to have a vision, a long range vision of what is it that we would like to build in our city and we would be known for. And this is the opportunity to do that.
Walter?
Well, I'm thinking if we just simply said it's for sale, whoever pays the most for it, you're not going to have the carousel there. Does everybody agree? Because they're wanting the land donated so they can put the carousel there is the impression I have.
We don't know that for
Well,
a fact, because there could be.
Well, I don't know either. That's why I'm saying that's that impression I got.
This
you
is
just
the
put it
first
up,
that I've heard of that.
But I didn't get the impression from them that they were they're still here. I think it's an ask, isn't it? For financial.
Yes, you may. Why don't you come up to the microphone though, so we can have it on the record? We're just keeping big picture here. Yeah. But since he asked, I would like you to have the opportunity to answer.
Yeah, we weren't coming here to ask like for a donation of the property. We were coming here to express an interest in it because we heard maybe it's for sale, maybe urban.
Chair Long, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't believe
Yes?
the microphone is on. And I don't know who's speaking either. I'm guessing it's Kirsten from the Neon Sign Museum, but I don't know.
Kind of like it was on.
Thank you, Jonathan, for
You
pointing
bet.
that out.
Saying that we're coming here to ask for donation from Urban Renewal.
Chair Long, I still can't hear. I don't believe the microphone's on.
Tap on it.
It was on before, it just wasn't going.
Probably battery's dead.
Okay, we're gonna swap out for one with live batteries. Oh, there we go. And Kristen, I'm sorry, will you just say your name so that Jonathan and everybody else knows? Okay,
Kirsten Benko.
thank you.
So the question was, were we asking Urban Renewal for a donation? And the answer was no, that we are coming here to express that there's an interest in that property as we've, had architects out here, talking about the carousel and the operation of the carousel and looking around the community to see, okay, how is this going to fit in? And when we heard that that lot potentially was available for sale or that Urban Renewal was seeking
Okay.
interest from the community over what might be there.
Well, I think that's helpful. Because, I was going to say, everybody's kind of got a gourmet meal in mind, and I was going to give a meat and potato answer and say, sell the Tony's lot to whoever pays the most for it. We have a commitment. We aren't wild about having this commitment. It was made years ago. I don't think it's something we can back out of. So most of our money is going to go to First Street, I think. I don't see how we can avoid that. I'm not recommending we avoid that. It just doesn't seem like it's something that's going to work. So, but if we can somehow get the carousel there with the few dollars we have, and I think we can specify when we sell it, whoever buys it is going to need to do, I don't know how to word it, something that we like. I'm fine with that. But I agree. The money crunch is an issue, and we don't have to sell Tony's right now. And if there's more money coming into this community and we can put a carousel there, I think most people here think that's marvelous. But where are we going to get the money is the question, because we have a commitment on this First Street thing. And it sounds like we're not going to be able to do a whole lot more. And yet we still have other people that would really like to get some money to help with the thing that they're working on, some developers and stuff. And I don't know how we're going to be able to do a whole lot of more projects.
Thanks, Walter. Stacy, do you want to add anything?
I think most everything that I've thought of has been said. I was pleased to look at the responses, and I think a lot of those you could combine together and say similarly they could be solved, in very like ways. Whether it's the park and green space, and then a space to have gatherings and the amphitheater type feel or a stage. A lot of that I've seen done in other places all in one space. So I think a lot of that probably could end up in the same way or completed similarly. I think the challenge lies with what do we have to spend? And I think probably figuring out where we are and what we're going to need to spend will then help dictate what's left over, and if anything, and obviously we can take it from there. But I think it's unfortunate because these are great, and at the time when we asked for this, I think that was our plan. But
You'd rather have a gourmet meal than meat and potatoes?
I'd rather have what I think the community is interested in if we can afford it. But if we can't, then we got to live within our means. And
I feel that way too.
And something I'll point out on that comment, and I know it was raised earlier, how much will we have left for the Tony site? And to Commissioner Hagee's point, I think when we started down this path, or when we started down the path of demoing the building, it was immediately going into an RFP, immediately going into private developer coming in and seeing what they can put on that property. So I think we can, maybe still dream big on some of these things that have been provided and not necessarily be the agency that is paying for it. So just some food for thought on that.
And thank you for all your work. And I can tell that it made a big difference how much thought you put into it and processing it and putting it in a way that was really helpful for us. Is there anything that, I mean, I know Dan does a great job of presenting it, but is there anything you want to add or anything that popped out to you when you were really immersed in all this?
I think to Stacy's point, the idea of some sort of a combination, I think an RFP that would identify some major elements here and put it out there and see what type of response we might get. We have received some informal ideas of the value of the Tony's site, and I would caution that we're not sitting on a gold mine there, surprisingly. It's a valuable downtown site, but it's not going to get us out of the financial pickle that we're in right now. It would help, but it's not a answer unto itself. So if we could come back with a draft RFP that would attempt to capture the flavor of some of these public comments, and I don't see it being an either or proposition. I think in combination with the Federal Street Plaza, we could do something creative that would create an activity hub, and maybe the carousel is part of that. Maybe not, who knows? But
And it would be maybe more of a request for concepts though, because we talked about that before, that if you do a RFP, it requires more on the part of the person making the proposal, and we don't want to make a burden to keep good ideas out.
exactly, a request for expressions of interest.
Thank you. Yes, I couldn't remember the.
Clear.
Thanks.
Thank you for that reminder. Yeah.
So I'm Ann Moorhead, Special Projects Coordinator. I don't have too much more to add. I think it's been covered really well. I really enjoyed reading through all the responses received through this survey. I'll say the number 248 is not all unique, but it was definitely interesting to see how many people were interested in this project. I think moving forward with that kind of request for interest is a really valuable way of showing that we're really taking into account community feedback as much as we can, which is really a matter of maintaining trust with the community after we've asked them to provide their thoughts on this project. So I really look forward to seeing, hopefully, if we can get some responses from a request for interest or something along those lines.
Excellent comments. Thank you. You can tell she's going to go far.
Can I ask her a question? Is it typical, or have you seen in other examples? I mean, at some point, do you, I don't want to say respond, but at least thank you. We received everybody's, and I don't mean individually, but maybe a citywide, thank you very much for all of those. We're going to carefully consider, because we want to encourage people to do that again. Should we have, and we don't want them to think that we just took it and threw it in the trash, right? I mean, that we're carefully considering. I don't know how to do that, but have you ever seen that done, or is it, what would be the typical, have you seen? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I can't say I have a perfect answer. There is definitely, something to be said about putting the results out, Facebook posts, thanking everyone. But I think ultimately it really comes down to people seeing that their words have had an impact as far as maintaining that trust that they're going to keep putting their words out, because if they feel like they're not listened to, then I feel like that effort's going to quickly diminish.
Yeah.
So ultimately, as much as I definitely think we could put out a Facebook post with the responses, and I think that'd be great. We can definitely go forward and do that. It's ultimately going to be the action that people respond to the best, which, with our circumstances is what it is.
Yeah.
I feel the biggest problem with my statement of let's just sell it is we get all this input and then you just sell it to the highest bidder. It's kind of like, well, we got all your input. We really aren't going to use it though. So, if we put out the request and stuff, it looks like, and we got a lot of input. Now we need somebody to step up and give us the best offer. It's not necessarily the most money, but the best offer that meets the input that we got.
Within the parameters of that input.
May I ask a quick question? I drove by and I looked back at Tony's building in the old Bonanza 88-cent store. It was all painted. What an improvement. Who did that?
Don't know. Which I did.
Someone painted that building. It looks great. And it really enhances that one little act, just improves the property. No, it was the building wall of the, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I might know a guy. No, we had that done. As far as putting up the fencing. Yeah, it's just otherwise it was just a modge podge of colors and
See,
everything.
those little details make a difference. So kudos back to you.
Well, thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
For the record, Josh Kapler.
Right.
Excellent. Thank
And
you.
one more, because, I've seen when you dream big, big things happen. And I've seen it time and time again, the Granada, all of the developments downtown, the Neon Sign Museum, that started with just an idea, and then it developed and people got involved. That's how we make change. So I just challenge everyone, dream big.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
All right. I think we are ready to move on to the last discussion item, the Gateway Urban Renewal Plan Revision.
Thank you very much. This one started, I think, more than a year ago. Thank you, Josh. March 21st, 2023, agency staff proposed a revision of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Plan, which had not been updated since 2009. The current plan lists a number of projects which have since been completed. Even in 2009, some have been completed. Some projects have fallen off. We've had new projects come forward. Best practice is to identify those projects in our urban renewal plan. We're really writing an historical document here. This is a documentation of a 30-year history of the Urban Renewal Agency. At the October 17, 2023 meeting, staff accepted a board accepted a proposed schedule of monthly work sessions to accomplish those tasks. And we continued in December and January, revising goals and objectives. Those goals and objectives are included now in the draft plan that you have attached to the report. One of the projects that will be included in that are property rehabilitation grants and agreements. That's a latest incarnation of the incentive program development funding agreements. We originally had, as part of this meeting, a review of the incentive program that we presented in May, decided because of the length of this meeting and also because of the uncertainties of funding, it'd be premature to try to bring those forward. We still hope to do so, but not quite yet. I won't go through the staff report in much more detail than that because I would like to talk about the plan itself, but I would like to talk a little bit more about that concept of MI, maximum debt. Of course, we went into this in fiscal quite a bit, but the distinction between formal debt and contract debt on page 87 of the staff report, you have that explanation from Nick Popanuk of our fiscal consultant Tiberius that puts that definition into more words. And again, it's complicated, but the idea that in expanding MI, you're not necessarily increasing formal debt. You're not taking out a larger loan, for instance, but you are expanding the capacity to expend TIF that you would otherwise be able to collect. So that's the one distinction I want to try to hammer home, and it's probably just me, but I've taken the longest time to try to figure that out. And so I wanted to get that captured. Going on to the plan itself, you will see, and I'm on page 88 of the staff report now, major revisions to the plan. A rearrangement of 2009 projects by category, the revised goals and objectives, and those are on page 103 of the packet. The projects list, and we are, in keeping with the idea of best practices, defining several projects and putting those into the plan. Basalt Commons being one of them. First Street, identified as a streetscape project in the 2009 plan, but never completed. And the Tony site redevelopment. The incentive program would also be listed as a project, but it was in there already. So it's a reworking of the project as it existed. And we talk about that here under the property rehabilitation program. As of the date of this staff report, several individual projects are under consideration, pending or postponed under property rehabilitation grants and agreements. The Mint, Sigmund's Flowers, Canton Walk, Vote Block Facade, Meyer Facade, Last Stop Upper Story Residential Development, and others are coming forward, at least 2 in the past 3 weeks. So again, okay, how do we have the money to do those? It's an open question, but for the sake of honoring those that have been presented and the conversations that have been underway for a number of months, I think it's important to at least note those for the record that they are out there. Presentation of,
I'm sorry. And there are more that people have been working on, but just hadn't realized that there was a financial issue and hadn't brought it forward. So it's important for the board to realize there's more out there.
No, thank you. Presentation of the draft plan. This draft plan today is intended as a starting point for board review. We will invite you first to look at the plan. It's a red line version, so you can see what was in the original 2009 and how we've changed it. It looks kind of scary because there are a lot of typographical and format changes that have been made. But the 3 things that I've mentioned just now are the fundamental changes to that 2009. Rearrangement of the projects, revised goals and objectives, and adding those 3 projects, Basalt Commons, First Street, and Tony Site redevelopment. So if you would look this over the next few weeks, get any comments, changes, corrections back to me, take a look at the 2 highlighted sections under goals and objectives. This goes back a couple of months, but we did some wordsmithing there. And you have not seen those 2 items since we discussed those. And I can't remember when it was now. It was probably back in February. So see if those 2 highlighted areas and goals and objectives work for you. And please return comments to me. And then at the July 16th meeting, I'd like to present a final draft of the urban renewal revision. Since there are changes to the goals and objectives that will be presented to the Dalles City Council for recommendation, and that follows the guidance established in the plan itself. I would ask if you feel comfortable with it, consensus allowing us to prepare a resolution for consideration at the July 16th board meeting, and that would be recommending to the Dalles City Council approval of the urban renewal plan revisions for adoption through special ordinance. And again, that would be subject to your approval of that final draft on July 16th. If the draft looks good, then we would have a resolution accompanying it, and that resolution would set up a following decision by City Council, and we can actually put this revision to rest.
Questions, comments from the board?
I'm in favor of moving forward on that plan.
Thank you.
Okay. And so we have a couple weeks to get back to you with any additional.
So I was just going to ask, what, obviously you don't want it the day of the meeting so that you can get the packet out. What date, maybe if you give us a date by which would be most helpful?
The packet should go out a week prior to the 16th. If I could have comments by the Friday before that.
Just give me a date and I'll get it to you.
Always a good question.
12th then?
Yep.
Say the 5th?
Oh, the 5th?
The week
July
before
5th?
the 5th? Yep.
Okay. Okay.
July 5th.
Deadlines are nice.
Okay. And
On the list.
I'm okay.
you're okay? All right. And so just real quick, I want to open up and see if there's any public comment or feedback on the draft change to the plan so far. Okay, just making sure. All right, great. So good job, you guys, getting
That
through
Be
all
it
of.
for me.
Okay. So, any board member comments or questions? Yes.
Just, I guess, a general comment. I mean, after all this discussion, I mean, it kind of lays out there what kind of difficult decisions we have going forward because, you know, the plan, the projects you mentioned, the projects you say are still out there, the people that coming with projects. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that, you know, that needs help or that, you know, ideally needs help. And it's going to be difficult for us to make decisions about, you know, whether the commitment to the First Street project is the primary thing and we don't have much money left, or whether we bail on that and we take more money. I mean, there's no easy decision, you know, kind of from my perspective. So that's a challenge and people should just understand that. The other question I had for you, Dan, was, and it was in the minutes, and I think last time we met, there was going to be a map that was going to be, you'd be able to look at it and has all of the projects that have been completed by urban renewal. And my question was, what's the status of that? Because I think you were going to send us a link to that.
I was going to send you a link and I think I blew it and I just didn't send the link
Okay.
to Paula and ask her to forward it to you.
I thought it was probably Paula.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's done. It's ready for your review. We just need to get the link
He
to
said he
you.
didn't send it
And
to
I have
you.
an interest in that as
Okay.
well. So
Yeah. I think that's on me. So
No problem. I just was curious. It was in the minutes that you were going to send that out. And the thing is, I think that
Thank you
is
for
something
asking.
that will be of interest to the public in general, because if you look at that, I'm assuming, because I haven't seen it, but I'm assuming that be lots of stuff like, oh, they did that. Oh, they did this. Oh, they did that.
yeah, and frankly, it occurs to me that this is an interesting conundrum now because I'm unscheduled to do a presentation at the Dalles Chamber of Community Affairs this Thursday showing that map. So if you want to see it, join the.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Effort.
Here's a draft
There
for
you
you. I don't know if it's finalized all the way. Probably. This is another project that we had Ann assist us with. She's, yeah.
Doing this.
She's leaving next month and she'll no longer be with the city. So we're gonna have some big shoes to fill after she leaves. But we're
Writing
trying to
a
get as
really
much
good
out of
reference
her
letter,
until
right?
yeah.
You're a rare student.
Any of the blue have been completed.
Where's
Columbia
it?
Gorge Community College relocation was an early urban renewal priority. The Williams Building across from the Civic Auditorium. The black ones were abandoned. The purple ones, as I recall, are potentials and the green ones are underway. 72, somewhere around 72 projects, most of which were completed. You'll see more of the black ones on the west side. That's going back to before the west side was deleted from the district. Going back to Measure 5. Of course, a lot of them, Marine Terminal, were composites of different funding sources. But urban renewal, thank you, sir. Urban renewal would be the gap funding or sometimes the primary driver of funding on that one. And it really is interesting to go through this. And again, it'll be live. I would like you to have a chance to review it. So we will send you that link. Take a look. If you see anything, mistakes, let me know. But again, appreciation to Ann for the technical expertise to make that happen.
Stacy?
Josh, would it be possible to get a copy of the spreadsheet just so I can that's how my mind works. So if I could see it and put number just for fun myself, I think it might help me. Obviously not to, not to utilize outside of just trying to figure out what you're thinking and
Confidential for the board, maybe.
Yeah, we can do that.
The board can do that. Any other comments or questions from the board?
So I guess my one question for the board might be
Yeah, I gotta give you some direction.
on
Yeah,
on First Street.
realize that.
And it may be something we just continue to have additional conversations with the city on. I know these alternatives were fresh Friday, so we haven't really had a lot of time to discuss with the public works director or the city manager on these and potential funding sources to complete different projects.
But I think what I'm hearing, and you guys jump in if this is wrong, but I think what I'm hearing is urban renewal is interested in funding things that are typically urban renewal, not infrastructure. And we are placing more of a priority on helping the other projects that we have than First Street. First Street doesn't feel like a priority to us anymore. It was something that was handed to us. It's not time sensitive. It's not like we have a new development going in that's really relying on that. And one time there was. And so I think we're looking for what's the bare bones minimum that we would contribute to it so we can continue to do the good work that we can with the rest of the money. That's what I heard people saying.
I
Okay.
agree.
And using the value, and I like that idea. I mean, it still makes it nice and clean and neat, but trying to incorporate, I would like to see personally the incorporate in there the value engineering wherever possible. So it looks nice and clean and neat, but maybe not as beautiful as we would have liked.
And my addition would be leveraging every dollar that we have
Mhm.
and making the most out of it.
The other thing I was going to say was, what Walter had said earlier. I mean, I'm kind of curious about that commitment. It's not, I wasn't on, well, I don't remember if I was on the board at the time or not, but it was a long time ago. It's like, what commitment does Urban Renewal have to that project? Because I don't want to just bail out of it either, right? Because hopefully it can be somehow we, as a partnership with the city, can figure out how to do the best things we can do as Urban Renewal and the best things that the city can do as the city.
And I'll be bringing it up at the SIP meeting.
But that's an area that we just need to have a chance to talk with Matthew and discuss these items and get his take. We haven't had that input.
Actually, I have talked to Matthew twice about it, including this morning, but the rest of the board doesn't.
I have not.
Yeah. He pretty much just wanted to know what we were doing. He didn't give direction.
Got it.
Well, if there's some way to get funds to do the infrastructure, the expensive stuff we talked about, the retaining wall and everything, and more urban renewal can be spent on stuff that everybody feels is along the lines of urban renewal. But I mean, I don't think you can do the beautification and leave the foundation crumbling.
Well,
We can't leave the foundation crumbling because it's a safety issue, but it's,
Right.
that helps.
Thank you. Yeah.
go forth.
Where's Matt?
Question.
Yeah, we'll get there.
So technically on the agenda, it's staff comments and project updates, but I think we've covered it. Is that? do you
I
have
just want to
anything
give
else?
one staff update.
Okay.
We're gonna go right back to First Street. The First Street parking lots, I sent out an email a little bit ago. For anybody else here in the public, we had budgeted to resurface, basically fill some cracks and stripe the lots. As the crews were out there, they were using some heavy duty machinery that ultimately that they use to clean out every crack before they apply any surface. The deterioration of the asphalt that's out there, it was just ripping apart.
Sure.
So we're now in the current state that's out there. Our public works team put together a great quote for us. We were going to move forward first part of July. And then I decided to contact the State Historic Preservation Office. And this is the fact that area is actually former Chinatown. So it is actually in an archaeological zone. So I just, in an abundance of caution, reached out to them, I touched base with the archaeologist that's working on the First Street project. He said, shoot them an email, should be no problem. I also touched base with Eric Gleason, who owns the Chinese building, and Eric was instrumental in establishing that archaeological zone. Eric's the same. He says, no problem. Yeah, just resurface in the parking lot. Submit to SHPO, and SHPO comes back and said, actually, you need to take a closer look at this. So I followed the steps and I submitted all the documents to them, and they came back after 2 weeks of reviewing it and came back and said, we need more information, and told me to hire an archaeologist. So unfortunately, there's been some roadblocks on that one, but I am in contact with about 3 of them right now. I'm going to pull together some quotes. I'm going to try to push and get this thing moving as fast as we can. But as I've mentioned before, I don't think it's in the state where we're going to open it up to parking right now. And it's kind of an inconvenience for people. So it's really kind of a top priority. We've been focusing on it. The determination from SHPO came on Friday. So we've been right on it and trying to get this thing moving moving quickly. The big thing is there is actually artifacts that are not too far below the surface. And this was found when they did a big archaeological dig. I think it was 2014 when this happened. So there's profiles showing where those artifacts are, and they're full of artifacts. So I understand SHPO's caution in that if you're using heavy machinery, you get on there, you could pull up some artifacts. So I'm trying to see what the damage is with with this whole thing with SHPO, but as soon as we get that figured out, I will be moving forward and trying to get those lots open back up. So that's my update on the lots.
So during normal business hours, there's quite a few people that would like to park in that area. Is that what's going on?
There are, yeah. We have some signs up. Signs are getting moved. People are moving in. So I'm checking with our team to see if we can't just put some barricades up right now. So, really, as I mentioned in my email, I wanted to move forward with this because, summer activities are going to be upon us. The recreation building is going to be reopening very soon. There's going to be, people all over our downtown. So we're really trying to get these things open back up as soon as we can. But right now there's a bit of a delay, but we are on it and trying to figure it out.
I told you this privately, but I'll tell you this publicly that you did the right thing and thank you.
Oh, thanks.
It was. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Oh, sorry. What? You want to?
Nope.
Real quick? No, I'm just kidding. Yes.
Good news on some money.
Yes.
We have been notified by EPA $500,000 grant to renew the brownfield program. We submitted the draft work plan last week. That's under review by the EPA. We anticipate starting that grant October 1st.
Great.
Three-year
Thank you.
grant.
That is good news. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay. Now I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.